Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink, it is time for some PathOfExile 1 discussion. The single question I've been asked the most since 3.26 went live is what's the best shipping strategy for Kingsmarch content? What sort of crops should I be sending? Where should I be sending them? And whilst we've got hunches at the moment, the answer needs to be stated right up front. The answer is, not only do I not know, but no one else does at the moment either. I mean, someone with access to Grinding Gear Games' internal data tables, they would actually be able to work out an optimum strategy. But outside of that, there's nothing that I can recommend and say, hey, this has been proven by a large data set. Back in 2024, we did have a large data set and it came up with some pretty surprising results as to what was the best way to engage with Kingsmarch. There was then some speculation that was never really confirmed either way, that there might have been some stealth changes after that. But ultimately, there were three main strategies that people were using when it came to engaging with Kingsmarch in 3.25. The first one was sending shipments of 50 million with a mixture of all 5 crops to one of the closer ports. So people were generally avoiding Kalguur for this because with Kalguur there was no way to reduce the failure chance below 10%, even if you had a perfect suite of rank 10 shippers in 3.25, which are now rank 5 shippers in 3.26. So that was the first strategy, and across a large data set, we came to the conclusion it was about 1.65 mirror shards per shipment that you sent off. Then there was a strategy that got proposed after a number of people did some data crunching of exactly how the shipments worked. And that was to send a shipment that was 315,000 units of corn, 315,000 units of wheat, and send it to any of the destinations alongside enough thaumaturgic dust to double the value of the shipment. At the time, this was averaging 0.65 mirror shards, and it seemed like it was slightly better, but the big but is that we don't know if that's still the case in 3.26. The third strategy is both less lucrative, but also more confirmed to work. And that is to send shipments with a small 5-figure amount of Blue Zanth and send them to Kalguur. So when I say small 5 figures, I don't mean a shipment value in the 10,000 to 20,000 range. I mean that the actual number of Blue Zanth items that you send is in the 10 to 20,000 range. Sending those to Kalguur, especially when there is a port quota bonus for Blue Zanth at Kalguur, this does seem to quite frequently grant you raw divine orbs. But ultimately, if it does turn out that the mirror shard rates are similar to what we thought they were in 3.25, then that's kind of going to end up being a bad use of your Blue Zanth, at least once we get a little bit later in the league and mirror shards go up in price a bit. The other thing that's worth being aware of is the metals. So the whole meta for sending metals has changed a bit. In the last league, it was generally the case that you would send a bunch of small shipments to Ribenfell, very small shipments with Verisium. You can still do this, but instead of a minimum of 2 bars of Verisium, the new minimum is 782 bars of Verisium, and ultimately, all you get is 7 scarabs for your time. It used to be 3 for sending the 2. Now this might sound fantastic. I mean, what do I care about the Verisium? I'm getting something for nothing. But you're not just paying 782 units of Verisium that you've marked in maps, you are also spending all of the gold that it costs to mine that Verisium, to smelt it, and also to pay your shippers while I go to Ribenfell and come back. None of this is an onerous amount, so it's not like it's a terrible decision or anything, just that it's not necessarily nearly as good as it was last league. The shipments that I've found have been better though have been sending off Crimson Iron in approximately 10,000 bar lots to basically any of the different ports. And you want to do this on a character that is at least character level 86, and I think it seems to be better again when you're level 90. What this will do is those ports will then send back a whole bunch of armor that is level appropriate for your character, which is often itemable 86, and it will be somewhat frequently well rolled. A lot of these are the sorts of items that sell pretty well very, very early in a league. A number of the items I've got this way have sold for anything from half a divine to 3 divines, but we are now at the point, being on the second weekend of the league, that you're going to find a lot less value in these sorts of just general good stuff rares. When we're talking a general good stuff rare here, we're talking of something like boots with 30% movement speed, tier 1 suppression, 1 maybe tier 3 elemental resistance, and nothing much else on them. These are just generic good stuff boots. Throw them in a 100 chaos tab, they'll sell if it's the first week. They might or might not sell in the second week, and after the second week, they won't sell at all unless someone wants them as a recombination input. But particularly if you play in solo self-found, it becomes important to know which of the ports has which affinities. So if you send to Nakano, you will get back strength armor. If you send to Pondium, you'll get back intelligence armor. And if you send to Te Onui, you'll get back evasion armor. So Pondium, Te Onui, these are often the best ones, but definitely Nakano has a purpose as well.
If you send to either Rivenfell or to Kalguur, you'll just get back random armor instead. You can also send off Orialchum, this comes back as weapons, and honestly I've almost never been impressed with the outcomes here, but maybe you'll have more luck than I did. When it comes to sending off Amber, you can send this to Te Onui for jewelry with quality, or alternately you can send it to Pondium for amulets, which are probably the slot that has the most value in it. Rivenfell will get you rings, Nakanu will get you belts, and Kalguur will get you rings and belts. Bismuth can be sent to different places for a variety of different things. Probably the most valuable of these is sending it to Kalguur, where you'll get ward armor. This is something that's very niche though. Not many people want it, but the people that want it, they do want well-rolled ward armor, so there's a chance of getting something useful there. And then when it comes to Verisium, there's not really anywhere fantastic anymore. You can send it to Rivenfell for a small amount of scarabs, you can send it to Nakano for a small amount of stack decks, you can send it to Pondium for a bunch of heist paraphernalia, you can send it to Te Onui for unique items, or you can send it to Kalguur for splinters, but basically all of these are pretty bad. The last thing that you can chase is the port quotas. So you'll see here that Rivenfell wants 94,000 total wheat and 59,000 total corn, and this is partly filled. You'll also see that plus 30% and plus 20% that's listed on each of those. So what this means is that each 10,000 wheat that I send, up until I hit that 94,000 threshold, each 10,000 wheat that I send counts as 13,000 for the purposes of allocating rewards. But once you fully fill one of these port quotas, and you'll see that this shipment to Pondium is actually doing that. I'm sending off 34,000 corn there at the moment. When that returns, it will fully fill it. You'll always get a unique item. Now, most of the time, these unique items will be trash, but there are two very important ones, Yinda's Stand and Cadigan's Authority. Cadigan's Authority, of course, is replacing Searle's Masterwork, which did not go core because it was related to a 3.25 only mechanic, the Kalguur runesmithing. Now, these items are worth quite a bit. And the reason for that is that these port quotas are pretty onerous to send. Filling 34,000 corn is not a small amount, and that's one of the smaller quotas. Here you'll see 94,000 wheat, 59,000 corn. That is 150,000 units, which is a quarter of what would go into one of the 17 million shipments that were popular in 2024. That's a very large amount that you're sending off, and ultimately, is it worth it? And just for a unique item that has a small chance of being Yinda's Stand or Cadigan's Authority? Probably the answer is no. Even though Cadigan's Authority and Yinda's Stand are both worth quite a bit, I did get a Yinda's Stand and I sold it for 13.5 divines, but even with that in mind, chasing Mirror Shards is probably the stronger play. And these ultimately are some of the smaller quotas. Here we have 98,000 ore goods, which are substantially longer to create, and that came alongside 36,000 wheat. And down here in Te Onui, we have the absolutely monstrous 170,000 wheat. Of course, what this does mean is that if we do go for one of the larger strategies, then 170,000 wheat is going to count as 238,000 wheat, and that's exactly what I'm saving up for at the moment. One last thing that you should be aware of. No matter what you do, each of your farmers can only produce something like 7,500 shipment value per hour that they're employed on the farms. That's the limit if you have a tier 5 farmer that's working one of the farms. However, Refiner's Bargain does allow you to bypass that time gate, and that is through the life force found in your maps is granted as a random crop instead at 150% of the value. There's also the rarest of the Kalguur scarabs, which does a similar thing when it comes to metals. It allows you to bypass the time gate that's involved in both mining the metal and also in smelting it. These, however, are something Grinding Gear Games have decided to be very, very cautious with. They don't allow players to get a large amount of this bypass, so with Refiner's Bargain, it's tied to the harvest mechanic, and ultimately, unless you're throwing expensive and rare scarabs into it, you're not going to get a huge amount of additional crops with this. And the Kalguur scarab that allows ore to be harvested directly as smelted bars, that scarab is actually quite rare. So they're pretty careful about the time gating that's present in Kingsmarch. That's something that across the entire economy of PathOfExile, it's enforced pretty rigidly, although individual players that trade aggressively can bypass that. That said, I'm not aware of any really strong strategies that involve sending off large shipment sizes at the moment of metals. One last thing, of course, tattoos and Runegrafts. Tattoos and Runegrafts come primarily from the same mechanics as last league, but Lost in Transit is extraordinarily good at granting these. Ore deposits in your maps are sometimes replaced by lost shipments. A lost shipment is simply someone else's not very sensibly, not very strategically planned shipment that they've sent off, and they tend to have a number of very good well-rolled rares in them. which are definitely worth mousing over. Even if your loot filter tends to hide them, you want to at least have a look at them. But these often have Runegrafts and tattoos in them as well, so have a look for those. Anyways, that's all we know so far about shipping. Hopefully more will get figured out, but I don't think it's going to be figured out quickly. And as far as the optimization goes, should you go for 17 million? Should you go for 50 million? Should you go for filling port quotas? Right now, we're in the mess around and find out phase. People are messing around, people are finding out, but we don't yet know what the answers are going to be. Later on, we'll have a more emphatic answer on that. But there is a very good reason that I've taken my old video on shipment data and I've changed the title of it to say 2024 information, quite possibly out of date. I'm going to leave it there. May your Varlorbs have interesting results.